What if I told you that there is a place where the dead are buried with stones in their mouths, nails in their chests, and chains on their coffins just to make sure they stay quiet? Where vampires aren't afraid of the sun, dress in white, and can appear in the form of a simple sheep. In that same country, there are islands that float alone on lakes, and guests at a cursed wedding who pay the consequences to this day. It may sound like something out of a dark fairy tale, but all of this is part of everyday life in Serbia. And that's why today Bello Mundo is taking you there, a country of stone, blood, silence, and faith. What you'll see here looks like something from another planet. Number 1. Location and geographical data. Serbia lies right in the heart of the Balkan Peninsula in southeastern Europe. It has no access to the sea, but borders 8 countries, including Romania, Hungary, Croatia, Bulgaria, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. This central position in the region has transformed the territory into a true connecting point between different landscapes, climates, and ways of life. In the north, for example, the Vojvodina Plain is one of the most fertile agricultural areas in Europe, producing fruits such as raspberries and plums that are exported all over the world. In fact, few people know that Serbia is the largest exporter of raspberries on the planet. It alone accounts for about 30% of the entire international market. And the most curious thing is that much of this production comes from small family farms, which helps to ensure the quality of the fruit and preserves a tradition that has been passed down from generation to generation. In the south of the country, the landscape changes completely. Dense mountains, deep caves, gorges, and preserved forests dominate the scenery. It is in this region that the Danube River flows, covering almost 600 kilometers in Serbian territory and reaching its greatest depth there. One of the most impressive sights is the Đerdap Gorge, also known as the Iron Gates. There, the river flows through a series of stone walls, forming the largest river canyon in Europe. And it doesn't stop there. On the outskirts of the Iron Gates, 2 of the most curious landscapes in all of Serbia emerge. The so-called Devil's Town is a rocky field filled with more than 200 stone towers, sculpted by erosion over the centuries. On Mount Povlin, near the city of Zaječar, what catches the eye are huge stone spheres scattered along the mountain trails, as if they had been placed there on purpose. Both places hold mysteries and stories that we will tell you more about later. And if you think you've seen it all, wait until you see the Vlasina and Semeteš lakes. They have real floating islands. These are pieces of vegetation that break away from the banks and glide across the water, pushed by the wind. Some islands even have large trees, creating an almost surreal visual effect, as if nature had decided to play with the laws of physics. All this makes Serbia's geography not only fertile ground for agriculture, but also a living backdrop for mystery, imagination, and folklore. Number 2. History. Today, Serbia is an independent republic with a democratic government and a strong Orthodox Church presence. But the history of this piece of land is much older and full of twists and turns. Thousands of years ago, on the banks of the Danube River, there were already advanced settlements with signs of agriculture, pottery, trade, and even symbols resembling writing. It was the beginning of an occupation that never stopped. Then came the Celts, who named the current capital Singidunum. They chose a strategic hill by the river, and that is exactly where Belgrade stands today. Then the Romans took over. Just to give you an idea, no fewer than 18 Roman emperors were born in what is now Serbia. One of them, and perhaps the best known, was Constantine the Great, the emperor who legalized Christianity and founded the city of Constantinople, which later became Istanbul in present-day Turkey. For centuries, the empire left its mark everywhere, entire cities, routes, fortresses. But like all empires, Rome also fell. And that's when new peoples began to arrive. Among them were the Slavs, who came from Eastern Europe. They occupied the Balkans, founded kingdoms, and eventually formed the basis of the current Serbian population. The most prestigious phase came in the 14th century with the reign of Stefan Dušan, a ruler who managed to expand Serbia's borders like no other. He proclaimed himself emperor of the Serbs and Greeks, strengthened culture, organized a code of laws, and consolidated Orthodox Christianity as a symbol of national identity. But the heyday was short-lived. In 1389, the Battle of Kosovo turned the tide. It was the gateway to the rule of the Ottoman Empire, which would control the region for the next 3 centuries. The Ottomans came from Anatolia, were based in Istanbul, and expanded a Muslim empire that spread across 3 continents. During their rule, much was erased, but the Serbs resisted, especially in the monasteries, which became guardians of faith, language, and traditions. Independence only came in the 19th century after uprisings, wars, and negotiations. But peace was short-lived. The 20th century brought 2 world wars, the creation of Yugoslavia, and later one of the most violent periods in recent European history, the ethnic conflicts of the 90s, the siege of Belgrade, the NATO bombings, and the fragmentation of the country. Today, after so many new beginnings, Serbia remains there, trying to balance its turbulent past with a present that is still being built. Number 3. Population, religion, and languages. Serbia has just over 7 million inhabitants. The vast majority are Serbian, but the country is also home to Hungarians, Bosnians, Romanians, Albanians, and other groups spread across different regions, each with their own accents, traditions, and historical ties. Serbian is the official language and has a rare peculiarity. It can be written in both the Latin and Cyrillic alphabets. The 2 versions coexist naturally in everyday life. Street signs, newspapers, menus, documents. Everything is mixed, and those born there are used to reading both ways. In terms of religion, Orthodox Christianity is dominant, with a strong presence of the Serbian Orthodox Church in rituals, calendars, and family customs. But there are also Catholics in areas close to Croatia and Hungary, and Muslim communities more concentrated in the south, especially in the Sanjak region. And even with these major religions on the scene, popular beliefs remain alive. These are ancient rituals, amulets, charms, and superstitions that are passed down from generation to generation and continue to mark everyday life. Number 4. Superstitions and lucky charms. Superstition there is not a thing of ignorant people. It is part of life. It is in homes, in conversations, in habits that no one questions anymore. Even those who have studied, traveled the world, or live in big cities often continue to respect these beliefs as if they were part of the manual of existence. Among the most traditional amulets are the so-called amajli. These are small protective objects that can be worn on the body, hung at the entrance to the house, or kept in a special place. The horseshoe, for example, is almost mandatory. It is placed above the main door, usually facing downwards, as if to pull luck into the house. The 4-leaf clover is also taken seriously. But there is one condition: it only works if it is found by chance. If you find one and keep it, the clover becomes a kind of invisible shield, kept inside your wallet or between the pages of an important book. Babies are given a red string on their wrist as soon as they are born. It is to protect them from the evil eye, which according to belief can cause fever, crying, irritation, and even illnesses that no one can explain. And if the house has a wolf tooth, even better. It represents strength, courage, and protection against everything invisible. There is also garlic. This needs no explanation. In addition to scaring away vampires in folklore, it is still used as a shield against disease, envy, and negative energy. But there's more. If someone sweeps the house after sunset, they risk sweeping away abundance. Many people, just to be on the safe side, prefer to leave the dirt for tomorrow. Whistling indoors, then, is almost a provocation to bad luck. They say it attracts poverty, evil spirits, and even rats. And then there's the famous itch on the palm of your hand. If it's on the left, you can celebrate. Money is on its way. But if you scratch your right hand, you better get ready, because it means that money will go away with some unexpected expense. Breaking a mirror is another nightmare. It guarantees 7 years of bad luck. The broken piece must be thrown away immediately, so as not to let bad luck linger in the environment. Now, if you spill your coffee, there's no need to get angry. Many people believe that this means visitors are coming, and since hospitality is a serious matter there, spilled coffee is even a cause for joy. And among all these beliefs, there is one that is almost a silent law. Never sit at the corner of the table. They say that single women who sit there never get married, and even married women avoid it because they say it interferes with their relationship with their mother-in-law. The result? People changing seats at family lunches just so no one is marked by bad luck. In the end, it's these little rules that, even if they don't make much logical sense, remain firmly in place. And they shape the daily lives of a people who have learned to live with the invisible as a natural part of life. And since we're talking about luck, protection, and things beyond our control, there's a character that appears in almost every ancient Serbian story. A figure that mixes fear, death, and mystery. The dreaded vampires. Number 5. Vampires. When we think of vampires, that image automatically comes to mind. Black cape, gloomy castle in Transylvania, a pale count named Dracula, who only comes out at night and sleeps in a coffin. But the true origin of this creature does not come from Romania. They come from Serbia. And it all started with a man named Petar Blagojevic. He lived in a small, isolated village called Kisiljevo. Today, the place is part of Serbia, but at the time it belonged to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Petar died, natural death buried according to custom. So far, so good. However, in the following 8 days, 9 people also died. And it wasn't from illness. Before they died, they all reported the same thing, that they had been suffocated during the night by Petar himself. His widow said that he appeared at the door of his house asking for his shoes. Neighbors swore they saw his silhouette prowling around the village at dawn. Panic spread so quickly that no one could sleep anymore. The community was in despair and called the government. It was then that an Austrian officer named Ernst Frombald arrived in the village, accompanied by a priest. They listened to the reports, took statements, and decided to open the grave. What they saw inside left everyone breathless. Petar's body was intact, as if it had been buried hours before. His skin still had color, his beard had grown, and so had his nails. And fresh blood was dripping from his mouth. To those people, that was not a body. It was a vampire. The priest authorized the ritual. They drove a stake through the dead man's chest and burned everything immediately afterwards. And from that day on, no one else died. This was the first documented vampire in modern history. The case was published in the Viennese newspapers and spread throughout Europe. And it was there, in a forgotten village in Serbia, that the modern myth of the undead came to life. But what few people know is that Serbian vampires have almost nothing to do with those in Hollywood. Number 6. Differences between vampires. Forget the black suits, the gloomy castles, and the sharp teeth. Serbian vampires wear white, go about their business during the day, and have the strange power to transform themselves into common animals, such as horses or sheep. At first glance, they go unnoticed, but in legends they are considered dangerous, persistent, and almost impossible to stop. Contrary to what has been popularized in movies, they do not feed only on blood. In older versions, the attack was physical and direct, as if they were creatures guided by brute force, without mercy. And the reason for their reputation as immortals comes from another bizarre detail. Serbian vampires are said to have 2 hearts and 2 souls. The stories began to emerge around the 16th century, at a time when villages were often struck by mysterious diseases. When many deaths occurred in succession, residents sought explanations in the graves. If the body appeared too well preserved, with long nails or blood on the face, the conclusion was immediate. It was a vampire. It was believed that someone could become a vampire for various reasons: children who died before receiving some kind of blessing, people who had broken ties with religion, people who disappeared under strange circumstances, or who died violently. In other words, practically everything was seen as a sign that the soul had not found peace. And fear spread so quickly that in some villages burials began to be carried out with stones in the mouth of the deceased, nails in their chest, or even chains around the coffin, all to ensure that no one left the grave after the farewell. But Serbian folklore is not limited to vampires. There are plenty of other stories that continue to defy time, science, and any logical explanation. Number 7. Mysteries and legends. Remember at the beginning of the video when we talked about 2 places that defy any logical explanation? Well, now it's time to talk about them. Let's start with the so-called Devil's City. The name alone is enough to send a shiver down your spine, but what's really impressive is the site itself. Imagine more than 200 stone columns, thin and tall, with blocks stacked right at the top, as if someone had built them by hand. Except that no one built them. It is a natural formation, sculpted over thousands of years by wind, rain, and time. But try convincing the locals of that. The most famous legend says that there was once a village where a brother and sister, unaware of their kinship, were about to get married. On the eve of the wedding, supernatural forces turned all the guests to stone to prevent the sin from happening. Since then, the columns have been the petrified souls of that forbidden night. And anyone who passes by swears they feel a different presence in the air, as if they were stepping into a haunted place. Now let's climb a little higher and reach Mount Povlin, near Zaječar. In the middle of the trail, huge round stones appear, more than a meter in diameter. They look like bowling balls left in the woods, too round to be natural, too perfect to have appeared by chance. Some people believe they are dragon eggs, others say they store cosmic energy, or that they were placed there by lost civilizations. Science has its explanation. According to geologists, the so-called Povlin spheres were formed about 150 million years ago, when the region was still covered by a sea. They are the result of volcanic activity and tectonic disturbances, similar to those that occur today in Japan. However, as expected, this was never enough to silence the legends. Because in places like this, logic always takes a back seat, and Serbia seems proud of that. And so we end our journey through a country of traditions, epic history, and a people who know better than anyone how to keep their cultural identity alive. What did you think of these curiosities about Serbia? Which one surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments. Thank you for joining us here, and see you on our next adventure through this Bello Mundo of ours.